Thank you all. And I think I need to pause here because this next step is a distinct honor. This is a privilege. And I am honored. I'm beyond words. I stand before you today, and I am here to welcome to the stage His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Julius Maada.
Thank you very much. Let's sit down, please. Madam First Lady, the Director General of WTO, my dear sister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the President and Executives of the Oxford Africa Society, Dean of the Blavatnik School of Government, Professor Nari Woods, fellow Africans, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from the Republic of Sierra Leone, our beautiful country on the stunning West African coast. As we gather here today at the prestigious Oxford Africa Conference on the eve of Africa Day, I am struck by a profound contradiction. For centuries, ladies and gentlemen, the narrative of Africa has been shaped by outsiders. Our beloved continent, the cradle of humanity and home to ancient civilizations, bear immense cultural wealth. Yet, it has been reduced to simplistic narratives of dependency, conflict, and underdevelopment. These external narratives have influenced global perceptions, but even more dangerously, have shaped how we view ourselves. As I look around, I see some of the brightest minds from our beloved continent gathered at one of the world's most prestigious institutions. And in these esteemed halls of Oxford, where knowledge is valued, Africa's intellectual contributions are still undervalued. Our perspectives marginalized, and our agency questioned. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is our reality. A continent of 1.3 million people, with the youngest population in the world, vast natural resources, boundless creativity, still struggles to control its narrative and shape its future. But I see a profound shift, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you see it too. From Cape Town to Cairo, Freetown to Djibouti, Africans are awakening to the power of what I call quotidian African agency. And that is our capacity to make choices, act independently, and shape our destinies. This Daily African Agency involves farmers using innovative agricultural techniques, tech entrepreneurs developing solutions for local challenges, artists reclaiming our cultural narratives, and students questioning established norms while envisioning new possibilities. The Oxford Africa Society embodies this awakening, and I say thank you to you. Since the 1950s, the winds of decolonization swept across our continent, you have evolved from mere student club to a powerful community of change agents. I congratulate you. In an environment where it will be easy to become absorbed in academic pursuit or distance yourself from the challenges facing our continent, you have instead discovered your mission and fulfilled it faithfully. This year's theme, changing narratives, vision, action, and transformation of Africa, recognizes that we stand at a crossroads. This year, the African Union's focus on reparation acknowledges historical injustices while confronting contemporary challenges of economic exclusion and marginalization in global decision-making. We are all called to reimagine Africa, not as it has been portrayed, but as we know it to be, a continent of agency, innovation, untapped potential, ready to take its rightful place on the global stage. Yet, we will be naive to underestimate the resistance to this transformation. The path ahead is fraught with formidable obstacles, both external and internal. Externally, we face a global order that is not designed with our input or interest in mind. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed this reality. When vaccines became available, ladies and gentlemen, Africa stood last in line, not by accident, but by design. International financial systems continue to disadvantage our economies. Although we contribute a relatively small amounts to global greenhouse gas emissions, climate change disproportionately affects our communities. And global media persists in portraying our continent through a lens of poverty, conflict, and helplessness. Madam President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, internally, we must confront uncomfortable truths. Rising debt levels threaten our economic sovereignty. Food insecurity challenge our most basic resilience. The digital divide risks leaving our young people behind in the global knowledge economy. Governance failures have eroded public trust in our institutions in Africa. And all too often, our 54 nations speak with 54 different voices on global stage. diluting our collective influence. Perhaps most insidiously, we struggle against internalized narratives that limit our imagination of what Africa can truly be. After generations of being told what we cannot do, some have begun to believe it. These challenges can seem overwhelming. They might tempt us to retreat into the comfort of familiar patterns or seek external saviors. But there are no external saviors. But this is precisely what the old narrative would have us do. I stand before you today, not with easy answers, but with a powerful guiding principle. African agency. This principle, the insistence that Africans must be the primary architects of Africa's future, can illuminate our path forward. African agency is not merely a philosophical concept, but a practical approach to development, governance, and international relations. It demands that we move from being policy takers to policy makers, from consumers of others' solutions to creators of our own. In Sierra Leone, we have embraced this principle through our National Development Plan, which centers on 5 transformative game changers. 1, feed Salone, that is food security. This is our comprehensive strategy for food security and agro-industrial transformation, which puts our farmers at the center of our economic future. 2 is human capital development. Our bold reforms in education and healthcare that prepare our people to participate in the global knowledge economy and help shape it. 3, the youth employment scheme to create dignified, sustainable jobs that harness the creativity and energy of our young population. Technology and infrastructure development, using digital transformation to catch up and leapfrog traditional development stages. 5, public service reforms to enhance governance and service delivery to rebuild trust between citizens and government. These initiatives align with AU Agenda 2063 and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, demonstrating how national strategies can advance continental and global ambitions. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, they represent African solutions to African challenges, designed with specific context and aspirations in mind. Ladies and gentlemen, if the African agency is our compass, then what is our map? How do we translate this guiding principle into concrete action? Our plan must operate simultaneously at multiple levels, from the individual to the continental, from the cultural to the economic. First, we must assert our epistemic agency. And I say that again. We must assert our epistemic agency. Africans must lead knowledge production about Africa. This involves decolonizing education, prioritizing indigenous knowledge systems, and ensuring that African voices are adequately represented in global intellectual discussions. As Nelson Mandela once asserted, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." End of quote. By reclaiming our intellectual sovereignty, we lay the foundation for all other forms of agency. Second, we must institutionalize African agency in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, promoting our continent's role in advancing these fields. Africa has produced innovations that address unique African challenges, including mobile platforms and medical diagnosis suited for resource-limited environments. We must scale these successes through increased investment and cross-border collaboration in the continent. Third, we must assert African agency in key economic sectors like agriculture, extractive, and trade. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents a historic chance to boost intra-African trade from its current levels to create millions of jobs and develop regional value chains. Fifth, we must cultivate a Pan-African vision that transcends colonial boundaries and fosters solidarity among African peoples and diaspora communities. As Kwame Nkrumah reminded us, I am not, and I quote, "I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me." End of quote. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we must speak with only one voice in global forums. Our influence becomes undeniable when 54 nations of Africa align their positions on trade, climate, or financial architecture reforms. If we commit to this path, we will collectively create the future we truly desire. Ladies and gentlemen, envisioning a global order where African nations speak with a unified, influential voice on climate action, trade rules, and global security is crucial. An Africa where intracontinental trade flows freely, creating millions of jobs and prosperity for our citizens. An Africa where innovations address African challenges and scale globally. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a world where international financial institutions reflect Africa's economic weight and development priorities, where digital technologies link the most remote villages to global markets and knowledge. Imagine a continent where governance is transparent, responsive, and where citizens trust their institutions. An Africa where development initiatives effectively reach the most vulnerable populations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a far-off utopia. The fundamental elements are already being assembled through initiatives like the AFCFTA, the APRM, and various regional integration efforts. The critical question is not whether this future is achievable, but whether we will act with enough urgency, unity, and strategic vision to realize it. Changing the narrative about Africa involves more than just a shift in perceptions. It is about fundamentally transforming our realities. It is about building the Africa we want and shaping the international order we deserve. It is about telling a story of hope, resilience, and opportunity, not as public relations, but as a lived experience for all Africans. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Africans here, I address you today not as distant observers, but as active participants in this unfolding story. To the members of the Oxford Africa Society, you are part of a tradition of African excellence that spans generations. Your presence as this esteemed institution is not just a coincidence, it is crucial for the transformation of our continent. So, as you develop your knowledge and expand your networks, remember that you are not just building personal careers, but also contributing to a collective journey. Return to the continent, either physically or through your work, and apply your brilliance to our most pressing challenges. To policymakers and leaders like myself here, let us move beyond the rhetoric to implementation. Let our commitment to the African Agency be reflected in our budgets, policies, and diplomatic positions. Let us have the courage to challenge external demands when they do not serve our people's interest. To our international partners, we welcome collaboration that is grounded in mutual respect and shared interest. But understand that the era of externally imposed solutions is over. The most effective partnership we recognize and amplify African agency rather than substitute for it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on May 25th, 1963, when representatives of 30 African nations convened in Addis Ababa to form the Organization of African Unity, Emperor Haile Selassie reminded them, and I quote, "The task on which we have embarked, the making of Africa, We not wait. We must act to shape and mold the future and leave our imprint on the events as they slip past into history. End of quote. 62 years later, as we gather on the eve of Africa Day, his words resonate with renewed urgency. Our sacred mission remains to unite our continent, restore its dignity, and secure its future. It will not be easy, but it is not beyond our reach. Africa is waiting. Africa is watching. The world is listening. History is waiting. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We can do better than that, delegates. Let's appreciate His Excellency, the 5th President of Sierra Leone, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio.
Such an excellent, I'm inspired. I'm so ready right now to go and run for presidency in Zambia because that was just an incredible address. What were your takeaways?
The principle of African agency, that's gone through every layer of the speech, and that's so inspiring, especially epistemic agency around our knowledge systems.
That's true.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one for me too. How do we create knowledge for ourselves? And it takes me back to just thinking for some of the students in here, your thesis is waiting for you, but it is going to add to the knowledge bank that the president just spoke about. So without further ado, please allow us to bring back to the stage Nina and His Excellency for a fireside chat. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Going to be there?
Wow, that was so powerful, very inspiring. And I can't emphasize this enough, but we are so honored that you've been able to take time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. It means a great deal, not just to us, not just to Sierra Leone, and not just to West Africa or the African continent, but to everyone who is passionate and very keen on contributing to the progress of the continent. For me, especially as a woman in leadership, I'm very excited when I found out that you were a he for she campaign champion. And obviously that's not something we often see, that is prioritized in leadership spaces. And so for me, I'm very curious, what does gender equity mean to you personally? And how does that translate into policy and culture?
Thank you very much. I am a he for she, truly speaking, because I was fortunate maybe to have been raised by a single mother when I lost my dad at the age of 4. She did not have the fortune of going to school. She knew nothing about education. But because of her own values, tenacity, and hard work, she raised me single-handedly to be who I am today. May I so rest in peace. So for me, the agency in women I have witnessed firsthand, and maybe I'm a product of that. And that is why I value the contribution of women who have been put at the back You know, most times in Africa, they should be in the kitchen. They should not be had. So when I had the opportunity to be at the helm, I thought it was incumbent upon me to pay back.
That's really
And to also to help national contribution, because it's a disservice to say that you want to keep more than half of your population not engaged in the development process and think that we, the men, can do it all. That is a disservice. You must go full throttle on both sides. And the fact that women have not been fortunate because of structural restraints that we had put on them to be educated, to be empowered, and to be given equal opportunity, I thought my presidency would be a moment of liberation for them. And I've done quite a lot to liberate them, move them from the dungeons they have been placed, and to be wherever they can be. So we have had to pass the Women's Empowerment Bill, Gender Empowerment, and now women, at least starting from Parliament and all other positions, including the corporate space, you can have nothing less than 30% of women in Sierra Leone. Women can now own properties, which is not the case. So there's quite a lot involved in that. But that is my very first step. And I'm fortunate to have a wife who is an activist for women too, and a godchild, who has complemented my effort. I have led a people-centered administration. My programs have been people-centered. So what I have done is to make sure that the first reform actually was in the education sector. And that is because I know the power of education. So we made education, access to education free, and made it even more free for the godchild. If you were in Sierra Leone, you can go from preschool to the end of university because you are doing STEM discipline courses. You won't pay a dime. This is all for the women folk to catch up because they have been left behind for far too long. So there's quite a lot going on in that space. She recently, with the support of many others, she built a coalition to bring about prevention of early marriage, teenage marriage. Before, and in many African countries, even as I speak, girls at the age of 12, 11, 13 are being sent into marriage. Today in Sierra Leone, by law, and we are enforcing that law, it's a crime. There is a law, and we just passed that in addition to the gender bill that we passed. There was a time when rape of young girls and women became so rampant, I had to declare an emergency. And we put in place so many measures. This is all to protect the women, their dignity, and to allow them, especially the young girls, to nurture them and support them so that they can be equal partners. They can never reach become women of substance if we do not nurture them, if we do not give them a special place. So I have been considered a he for she because the only parent I had was a she.
Yes.
And she did a good job, as you can see.
She did. She did. Wow, that's so powerful. Your Excellency, if I may, I want to ask you one final question. And that's because across Sierra Leone and the wider West Africa region, you are definitely seen as someone who is committed to laying down the foundations for transformation. And I read about what you do. I'm sitting with you having conversations, and I'm in awe. What drives you? Like, what drives that approach, and what keeps you going?
Maybe I need to give you a sneak preview into my past.
Yes.
As a former military man, and I've had the opportunity of leading the government. And I thought it was necessary that I had so much experience. And during the intervening years, when I left and I went back to become democratically elected, I lived in very developed democracies around the world. I lived here, I lived in France, and I also lived in the United States. You cannot undertake fundamental reforms in a system and want it to survive without laying the foundation.
That's true.
So, I normally make the analogy. If you want to build a skyscraper, the foundation must be as strong as how high you want to go. So for me, we are pushed into, what is your priority? For me, I know that in the 21st century, education is the best foundation. The human capital. And when I talk about human capital, I mean taking care, feeding the mind through education, feeding this belly, the tummy, through food security, and taking care of the being through health. So this is what we call human capital. It's not just about education or maybe health. We combine all of these to mean human capital development. If you have a healthy person that is well educated and, of course, not malnourished, they are fit to go and they can survive anywhere in the world. So that is my mission. And to make Sierra Leoneans competitive around the world, as we were before, we were referred to as the Athens of West Africa because the first Western university south of the Sahara was founded in Sierra Leone in 1827.
That's powerful.
So, for me, our prowess then was projected not because of weapons or any other thing, but because of knowledge, formation, and sharing, which we did very well at the Frobe College. So I am eager to bring Sierra Leone back to its glory, especially in the 21st century. And that is why I've insisted on fit-for-purpose education. Fit-for-purpose education, one that we take them anywhere and they will be competitive, not just stay home and get employment and not produce. They have to be productive, they have to be healthy, and of course, they cannot be productive if they are not well educated.
That's really powerful. Please, another round of applause for His Excellency. You have given us such a powerful keynote, and this conversation has, I think everyone in this room is leaving here today inspired and empowered by your wisdom, by your words, by your knowledge. Thank you so, so much, His Excellency.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks to Nina. Thank you so, so much. We are delighted to just curate those nuggets. And I would like you for just a minute or so, if you would be seated and share with the person seated beside you, what is it that has stood out for you? There are certain things that the president has highlighted. I've had something around human capital, very, very important, human capital, solid education, food security, and good health. And so as we transition to the next session, these are things that we're going to mull over and see how we can implement in our context. Luhano, what's next?
Thank you so much, George. And up next, we have a fireside chat. And it's such an honor for me to introduce the two women that are going to come and speak on this stage. So a allow me to introduce Professor Woods, who is the founding dean here at the Blavatsky School of Government and Professor of Global Economic Governance here at Oxford. She's phenomenal, and she will be in conversation with somebody who truly inspires me, so I might be fangirling here, but please allow me to usher to the stage Dr. Ngozi Okonjo, who is... Thank you. Dr. Ngozi is the first woman and African to lead the World Trade Organization. She is a global finance expert, an economist, and international development professional with over 40 years of experience working globally.
Thank you.
Yeah, she has served as Minister of Finance in Nigeria and is a global advocate for inclusive trade and development. She's truly a trailblazer, and so we'll be having two incredible women here in conversation. So please give them another round of applause because they do deserve it.
Thank you. Well, good morning, folks. Can I start by just saying huge congratulations to the entire Africa Society Committee and all the students who weren't on the committee but who came together to make this conference possible. You organized, you fundraised, you persuaded some of the world's most inspiring leaders to come speak to you, so huge congratulations. I am truly honored always to be in a conversation with Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. You know, some people think that you make it to the top in public service by networking or by being in the right place at the right time or by being nice to the right people. And you're probably wrong. I have next to me somebody who was educated entirely in Nigeria and applied to Harvard University to do economics as an undergraduate. And she completely nailed it. She graduated magna cum laude from one of the toughest economics programs in the world. Hold on. She then did brilliantly in a degree in city planning and then applied to do her doctorate at the most difficult doctoral program in economics in the world at MIT. And there she excelled. And the lesson here, folks, is sharpen your brains. Be the sharpest, most precise tool. That's the first thing I want to say about Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She is a truly sharp precision tool. She is all these other things, a wonderful human being that everybody around the world loves to work with, and a very honest and frank one that people trust. But at your age, she was sharpening her brain. She put in the work. She excelled. And from there, she went to a brilliant 25-year career in the World Bank, rising to being managing director and doing possibly the best job that a managing director has done. And I say that as a scholar of the World Bank, so it's an informed view. Ngozi then served not once but twice as finance minister in her home country of Nigeria. And she's now got, well, I mean, you've always had the toughest jobs in the world, but now you really do have one as Director General of the World Trade Organization. Now, I'm going to start today's conversation with just three quite big questions to Ngozi, and then I'm going to come right to you for your questions to her. So be ready. Be ready with the question you want to ask. Make it short, make it sharp, and let's take this conversation forward. I want to start, Ngozi. And by the way, I didn't mention that I'm very proud that she's also got an honorary degree from this university, the University of Oxford. Welcome back to the school. I want to start, Ngozi, with President Bio just said, bring your brilliance home to your own country. And you did that. Now, a lot of graduate students at Oxford from the continent think that they'll have much more impact if they go and work at the World Bank or the IMF. Now, you've done that, but you also went home as finance minister. And I just wanted to start by your reflection on that call that President Bio gave this group bring your brilliance home. In your experience, it would be invidious to say, compare how much impact you had on your own country in the World Bank versus being finance minister, but reflect for us what it means to bring your brilliance home.
Well, thank you, Naira, and let me join you in saying congratulations to the Oxford Africa Society for organizing this event. And it's good to be back in the Blavatny School and with you, Naira, and to congratulate the First Lady of Sierra Leone and His Excellency for their presence. I think that there's no dichotomy in my mind between having served in the World Bank and having served in my country. I think that one helped the other in a way, and I want to explain what I mean. I never actually intended to work in the World Bank, to be honest. So my father was someone who believed totally in coming home to serve, and he also believed he had 2 daughters and 5 sons, and my father was a professor of economics, mathematical economics. So I actually grew up not liking economics because the books looked too boring. But eventually I ended up in that field and do not regret it. He believed in, you can go outside if you want to get educated, but you must come home to serve. And he really did that in us. But as I also was in graduate school at MIT, even when I was an undergraduate, I saw that there were not very many Africans in these global institutions and organizations. And I wondered why, and I wondered what impact it had. So I had this curiosity that maybe it would be good to have experience there. And I went to the World Bank as a summer intern when I was in graduate school and saw for myself. And that experience, the work was extremely interesting. But I thought I could learn much more about why other parts of the world were developing faster than we were. And maybe there were some lessons I could take back. That's what really got me into then applying for the Young Professionals Program and, getting in, and then it became a career. And subsequently, in between, I went back twice to be finance minister and foreign minister. Actually, the one longest serving, 7 years as finance minister, which is not easy, and then foreign affairs minister for a short time. So my reflection is this. When I was at the bank, I wanted to see why were we not on the continent developing as fast as I thought we should. Why did we have the East Asian miracle of East Asian countries that had started in the 1960s with the same level of per capita income, stripping away whilst we were still being held back? And I began to look and see what it is they were doing, we were not doing, and to acquire that knowledge. And then I thought at a particular time, it was also serendipity, I thought I should go and give back. So I actually, on my own, decided to take a leave of absence. And that was a time when President Obasanjo came to power and needed somebody to help with the debt, the country's debt. We owed $30 billion, but it was, no one had a good record of no systematic record of how much we owed, whom we owed it to, when we should pay, and all that. And debt service was lagging. So he was looking for someone, and someone suggested my name. So I took a leave of absence on my own to go back for, it was 9 months, 6 to 9 months, to just work with him on this debt issue. He was really obsessed by it, that we must get rid of the debt. When I went the first time, what he said to me was, I want to press a button and get a piece of paper printout that shows how much we owe, who we owe it to, when we should service the debt, how much we should service. And so I said, okay. So I worked at it. Our debt was in 7 different agencies: the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, here, there, everywhere. And so, to cut a long story short, it was quite a task to pull all this together, get the software, and we used the Commonwealth, and this would please Patricia, Scotland, when she was there. No, and when I told her the Commonwealth debt management software, we created a debt management office that didn't exist. I told him we needed to do that, and it's there today. And we put the software, the hardware, everything in, and he did indeed get to press the button and get everything. Then I went back to the bank after my leave of absence that I took on my own. And a couple of years later, he decided he needed a finance minister who could help get rid of this debt. And he said, that woman who came and helped, I think she can help us get rid of the debt. So he invited me back. He didn't actually ask me. He called the president of the World Bank then, Jim Wolfenson, and said, I need this woman to come and be my finance minister. Nobody asked me. I wasn't planning. It wasn't in my career plan. So I was sitting in my office. At that time, I was vice president of the bank and corporate secretary. And my office was next to the president. So he walks in and says to me, you're going to be finance minister of Nigeria. And I said, Jim, is that a dream or what? And he said, no, it's true. And I just spoke to your president. He asked that you do that. And I said, but you didn't ask me. We've got a couple of children in university at this time. We don't want to take loans, to pay for them. And if I leave, that's... Anyway, he said, you've got to go. So when I thought about it, I spoke with my husband and so on. And then the children, and we decided I should go and do it. So that's when I got there. The technical expertise and knowledge I had acquired working in the bank really helped. And this is why I do not think there's a dichotomy. I think if you serve outside, let's say in a multilateral or even private sector, you should try to take that knowledge and experience back to solve a problem. Okay, and it doesn't have to be in government only. You can set up in the private sector, in civil society, but try to help solve a problem. And that's what I did. And then we got rid of the debt. We got the debt relief, which gave me gray hair. But $30 billion got written off, and we cleared it. And $18 billion was completely written off, and we found innovative scheme. We were the first country allowed to buy back, the first low income at that time or developing country allowed to buy back its own debt. We bought 12 billion at 25 cents on the dollar. We got 18 billion forgiven, and we paid 6 billion. So,
and I just want to say, yeah, absolutely. I remember asking people in the bank why Ngozi had been so successful as managing director and corporate secretary, and it's a success that you took into the finance ministry. And they all said the same thing. They said, Ngozi, partly because she's so smart herself, she hires and surrounds herself. She builds a team of the smartest people in the organization. Of course, there were people in the World Bank that weren't very pleased with that because you coached their best. But it tells us two things. One, the ability to spot and recognize the smartest people. And the other thing is the ability to attract them to work with you rather than working with whoever they were working with previously. I just wanted to note that. Let's move to your day job now, right?
Can I just say something with that? I just want to say that no one succeeds alone. You need a team. Even in the government at that time, we built an economic team. And I really believe in teams, and I like to surround myself with young people. We have one, Miss Nicole Mensa, who is my special assistant. And she herself is very smart. She has a summa cum laude in economics from Cornell and a master's in applied economics, so a first-class degree. So you find, and as the president said, on the continent, we don't lack smart people. So I build my teams, including with young, smart Africans.
Now I want to come to the world at the moment. We have a new American administration, and their preferred foreign policy and trade policy is one which goes deal by deal, individual country by individual country. Some would describe it for other countries as like trying to ride a bronco in some ways. But for the continent of Africa, so richly and widely represented here today, what does it mean? Should individual countries on the continent be trying to do sweetheart deals with President Trump, because that seems to be his preferred way of operating, or should they try to hold together and negotiate en masse? What's your view?
Naira, that is such a $1 million question. Because, and I will have to find a very clever way to answer it. Because the WTO is very different from the World Bank in one way. Somebody in my position as the Director General must not say anything that interferes in the relationship between members. It's called a member-driven organization. And the reason is anything I say, because we're the only ones.
All right, welcome back. And in case you're just joining us, you're watching our special coverage on the Oxford Africa Conference currently underway in London. And we've had the President's keynote address, which a lot of people via our Facebook page have been commending that it's a wonderful and a powerful speech or statement that he made.
Honestly, for me, just now, we were actually discussing at the newsroom about the level of confidence of the president in speaking, and honestly I'm very impressed today, and the way he talk, he actually tells you that there are transformation in terms of what is happening in Sierra Leone, and I think every speaker who talking at the conference and actually making reference of what the president said. That shows that it's very important, and there are a lot of progress.
I think he was able to tackle all the issues that I think are of concerns to us Sierra Leoneans. One that has to do with food insecurity, digital divide, global health inequalities, and most importantly, which I really think speaks to us all, is writing our own narratives and calling on other, what should I say, development partners that you should come with respect, and give us an opportunity for us to be able to, tell our own stories or write our own stories. I think it's a powerful speech for me so far.
You're definitely right. I think the issue around Kodu Limited actually speaks about what needs to be done in terms of
our narratives. He just said it in a very smart way. He just addressed the whole issue in a very smart way about development partners and diplomatic things like that. But let's come to our guest in the studio as we try to wrap up this edition and join our team in London. Honorable Bamichide, I'd love to start off with you. I mean, you've had the president spoke about the importance of writing our own narratives. How do you think Sierra Leone has succeeded or failed in doing so?
Well, I wouldn't look at succeeding or failing. I'm looking at what is applicable to Sierra Leone, in the sense that now we've got the focus. We are working towards transition to transform lives. And to transform lives, you have to have the mental capacity to absorb and know what you want and lead your people. Because if you are talking about youth development, and he mentioned that they want to capacitate youth, I think there's a program going on right now, which I know is going on right, to improve the lives of these people. Because the negative narrative is they don't talk about youth development as social push. Let's forget about push. That's negative vibes. Let's come to positive thinking. How do we improve it? Encourage the leadership. And most of the time we look at things is that people put in a responsible position don't act responsibly, in the sense that they take things for granted. The youth is a very big program. How do you transform their lives? If you notice what is happening, the youth then asking this question, it's transforming their lives from where they started. That is why the WTO woman said, be smart and go back to develop your people. And I hope this is a wake-up call for these diasporans coming to here, to Sierra Leone. We are Sierra Leoneans. Come with impossible this idea and see how best you can use it to develop and transform lives of others. Not by telling me to text me and amassing something for yourself. That is what the transformation is. When you study out there, take the good side and bring it home to help to transform lives of the less fortunate. And that's a good thing. And then the whole thing about being respect and dignity. We don't go on as if we are cap in hand begging. But when they come, the ability to negotiate is our weakness. Yeah. We're talking about corridor holdings. Government had reviewed that old contract to a new one. And now look at the cracks, look at the holes. And because they don't respect us, we are playing politics by identifying individuals and throwing rocks at them. Now, go back now. You can stop it. Government can stop it and say, let us revisit again. Because all this threat they're doing about legal action, they own the courts. Agreed. But because we don't learn from our mistakes, we always renege when it is not necessary. And that is timing. Till we get a timing right, there will be no transformation. You say it in principle, come back and implement. He was talking about monitoring and evaluation. When you monitor, the evaluation will come out right to what you want. Because now we are talking about youth development. Government, I think the World Bank has spent billions of dollars to transform lives of youth. But because our own negative vibes, we say, instead of saying that they try, we say, hey, that's also cushion they bring in. That's negative vibes. So let us put hands on deck for the transformation. And government should be sincere and serious about it. Not providing the money and you don't monitor them. It will be a wasted endeavor.
And it's very important, like what Honorable Bamichidi said, the issues around implementation. And part of the implementation, there is also catchy point from the team, action. And action is about how we can able to implement, some of these policies, some of what have been laid down, by governments, to be precise, in Sierra Leone. So how can we, take action now as a nation, in moving the country forward? Solomon.
I think, just like what the president said, we should always tap into the values we have, the experiences we have, and how do we transform that transformative. That is the catch. But how do we do it? As I said earlier, we are developing, but at a slow pace. And that's what they said. We should move ahead by what? If we are to implement projects, let's have this timeline. For example, if we are to build a bridge or a Lungi bridge, let's say we have 2 years, 3 years as a timeline. And we also do what we call monitoring. And that monitoring, in as much as our Ministry of Finance give budgets as a quarterly, event, for every disbursement, you make sure for the purpose you disburse that money should be well monitored. From the monitoring aspect, then you see where you can evaluate, where there are roughages, where we should tackle, and how do we strengthen those weaker parts. The professor said we should sharpen our brains. That's what exactly we should be doing. Don't just have education without you transforming other people's life. She mentioned about civil society, journalists. All of us are integral in all of what we are doing. So in my own view, I would like to, advise, if you are in position, right? If you are a member of parliament, for the mere fact you are there to, formulate, in other words, look into bills, policies that are good for Sierra Leone, make sure you do it diligently.
One key thing that the president highlights that really speaks to me is the digital divide. Do you think youth in rural communities actually enjoying or having this facility of access to digital spaces and also that of education?
Now we are talking about science and technology, and we heard about we heard about other universities like the Eastern Polytechnic is now university, for which if you, the youth, you tap into those experiences, you will make it you make it right for yourself. People are using mobile phones, and we're now seeing how people are, grading themselves through these apps and the like. So the rural area, they also are integral. The president talked about, science and technology in Kono. We hope that university will be in existence. And also, when we talk about our policies, these are the 4 thematic areas when we talk about the arms of government. The executive is there to formulate, create policies, and send it down to the legislative, which is the parliament, for them to look at those laws. As I mentioned, the death penalty, the executive will not just sit as a junta government or military government and just want to expunge this. They will go through the normal procedure. They send it to parliament look into it and say, yes, we don't need to kill ourselves, let's expunge it. That's sharpening ourselves and transforming ourselves. You go down to the judiciary, you see the way they interpret the law. As I mentioned, we're having this November and the likes. They did their best after investigating, and they passed sentence. You come down to the fourth estate, for which we are doing, informing the public of what is happening. So these are the roles I think we should tap into and see how best we can transform Africa as a continent.
In the area of policies that you just highlighted, what will transformation look like for the average Sierra Leonean who lives in Krube, or maybe so in Cambia, with regards to all this policy implementation that you're talking about?
Well, this is the area of the communication wing at State House. I'm seeing them posting when President Bill traveled, for example, at Oxford, they will post it. President has to do this. We have so many developmental, issues across the country. This should be their role, and all of us bring in the facts that yes, as I mentioned, the 30% for women. Go down to Krube Bay and explain to them by doing what? Outreach, meeting the people, explain to them that women now have the value. You can able to tap into this. You have 30%, which is your right. Tap into the experience. Sharp your brain, as the speaker said. We also have, other developmental projects for which the communication wing has to endeavor so that people can understand that there are development going on within the rural area. So for me, it's not just the fun fire, posting pictures, but let's post real things that is happening in Sierra Leone. There are so many things happening, but we are not posting them. We just look at the negative aspect, like what Honorable Bamichidi said. President talked about Feed Sierra Leone, youth empowerment, technology. But all of this, how can we tap into them and inform our people that these are the areas we are looking into? So for me, let's stop the negative aspect about Kush, but let's see the youth that are developing. And there are so many youth developing. So many of them. It cuts across. To go to the provinces, you see youths are now, in
agriculture, innovation.
Exactly. So for me, we are moving, but at a gradual pace. So for me, that is the area I want us to look at. Monitoring, evaluation, then you bring out the reports, then we see how best we can.
Because that is very key in moving the nation, and you spoke about image, and it's also very key. There are other things that are actually happening positively in Sierra Leone, which we can able to fly up, as a nation as well. But the President, Honorable Bamichidi, spoke about human capital, which is key among his pillar in moving the country forward, and he talk about issues around Feed Sierra Leone, education, and also empowering the young people. He put all of that together, and he said it's human capital development. There are still challenges within that sector or within that pillar, for the president in moving the nation further. But what do you think needs to be done in getting all of that? Because it's look about education, look about job creation, and he spoke about 500,000 jobs, to be created, by his government, within this next 5 years.
Thank you. Sincerity of purpose. Looking at the president talking today, you saw his vision actualizing in his mind. It is people, we see sometimes when they give you responsibility, take it. That's why you should be smart. and forward-looking. He has the commitment. He believes, I love Sierra Leone, I want to transform it. You saw it in the statement, and you saw what is his body language. It means well for Sierra Leone. But it's the implementation. And because of the political will and sincerity of purpose, sometimes that's why we worry. And most of the people now are spinning things that is not spinnable. How can you be writing for government something when it's not spinnable? You're saying you're going to cut budget and you are flying. Some of this, but don't politicize it, don't spin it. Because sometimes when people charge with the responsibility, because we have reneged a little bit on our civic duty to be educating and sensitizing our people, then it comes to the information that border on good governance. And this government got here on the ticket in 2018 on good governance platform. And we've laid the foundation, we've got the free education. But we should be educating and sensitizing our people for them to understand so that we can build it. Because you are talking about unity in diversity. Have we really implemented it? It's just lip service. How do you want me to take things here? But when I saw his face today talking, he was trying to say that I love Sierra Leone. I mean well for the country. When you come, try to put certain structures in place so that the implementation can go on.
That begs my question. How do we move away from all of that, from speeches, from conferences, and actualizing the things that are of concern to us?
Talk and do. Do it now. That's all. You promise us that, but you don't do it. You leave it on technocrats. And what the technocrats are doing, like what that Kojuwela said, the TTO director, he said, I took the best out of this and came back and served my people because it's my parents. Believe that when you have gone abroad, take the best of those things and bring it to my country today. That's why we came home in the 70s. We had tickets to stay in England. We left it and come back. Not of visa they want to go for now. But at least they should appreciate your service. But now you bring this diaspora from Pakaba and bring them come, take money where the government gone, then go back. Did they implement something? Nothing. I'm not casting aspersion, but let us be sincere. When you come, you don't have a good idea. Convince your leader to do the right, the needful, so that the development can be effective. You're talking about road tax and everything. For every day here, it's extra taxation. And they are professionals. Are they advising the government? Lies in wrong work, all in foreign hands. Why don't you believe the capacity of Sierra Leoneans as of now?
The problem is sincerity.
That is the commitment. That's the commitment I'm talking about. I'm telling you certain things that should be in the hands of Sierra Leoneans are in the hands of foreigners.
But we also need private partnership.
The private partnerships.
All what is lacking here is the monitoring.
Listen to me now. You need private partnership.
Thank you.
The first machine and bring come. You know, after the time they're done, it's owned by the government. It's owned by the government.
Which machine?
The machine. So you train your people. That is what I'm saying. Emmanuel Gray. The machine was $6 million. I was in Parliament. We questioned it, but it is now part of NASIT's thing. Yes, that's my own agreement. We see sometimes when I talk, I'm not talking about because of political thing. I think Sierra Leone and try to implement what Sierra Leone should think. Be smart and develop your country. But we just talk smart and we don't do nothing. We are only lining our pockets. And then when people talk this one, they'll begin to say, nah, about that. No. Come and do the needful. You can still enjoy yourself. You have everything you want. But take sure you deliver the deliverables and nobody will ask you questions after.
Solomon Sundu, the president also mentioned something which has to do with the 54 African countries speaking with different voice. What's your take on that, and how can people like you, I mean civil society activists, ensure that our voices are not lost in all of this noise and things that are happening?
That is the area the West should be thinking of. We have been in this dungeon for long. Africans want to raise their voices. Let us have our own seats in the in the Security Council in the first place. If we have that seat, then we can be part of decision making. How can you shape Africans' life when we are not part of it? You take decision on behalf of us. We need to be there. We are integral because we are part of the continent. That is what the president is saying. Respect for each other. If you are coming to take my mineral, but what entails, that's the bargaining. As I mentioned, if we are to bargain on any policy or developments, it should be for what? Value for money. 50-50. You bring your money, you invest, you get your profits, and you leave the benefits to us, the citizens. For me, we are talking about so many developmental trajectory here, but ourselves, are we sincere? Leadership, whether you are a minister, you are a leader. You are in that ministry to formulate policies that can trickle down to the citizens. But if you are there not doing anything, it means you are just there to receive or do otherwise. And that is the problem.
Collect and leave.
President is making appointments, but those appointees, are they working towards his vision, most of them? So these are the real facts. Whether you are a director, whether you are a permanent secretary, in any area you find yourself, you are a leader. So make sure that leader or that of your leadership trickle down to us, the citizen. We cannot just be pointing finger at the head, the executive. But what are we doing? We call people technocrats. But if you go down there, they are the one doing the worst. Right? As I mentioned about project implementations, we have so many projects around. But think about the duration. They will use that as a yardstick where they will extort money from that same project. A case in point, look at Maada conference. Since President took over, they are still on rehabilitation. 7 years now down the line. You talk about the Sewa ground. Although NASIT has done their part.
National Stadium.
National Stadium. These are all the issues we are talking about. We are developing, but the slow pace at which we are going, that is the concern of the citizens. And when you talk about value for money, it means timely. Timeliness is very important and key. When we do come here, we come because there is time for us to fulfill. We cannot just come and sit because we want to talk, right? So let's use those, better experiences to shape ourselves. In Africa, our voice should be heard if we only do the needful. That is to say, if you are a leader or president, make sure you formulate a policy like what it said in the area of child mortality. We are now saying it. He has banned early child marriage. Is it not working? Before we were hearing about rapes and the like. We are not saying it's not happening, but it has reduced drastically because there are laws to protect our women. Those are the transformations. And the action points here, as the team goes, we need to take actions, punitive measures. If you fail to do your part, face the bullets. Like the Ministry of Education, we saw exactly what is happening, right? Over how many people cannot sit worse? The worst exam. Due to what? Lack of monitoring. You have this portal system for 4 good months. You, the minister or the chief examiner, cannot able to monitor those principals or teach them. So these are all the areas we are talking about. If you go and have your education, come back home and give service, just like what the other speaker said. So for me, it's a call for all of us. Let us come together and leave the politicking. Now we are hearing about, census. One of these days I was on one of your sister programs telling the opposition, we don't need the, crying or crying over spilled milk. Now, what you need to do, go back to your people, sensitize them, tell them that we are having this census in 2026. Come out and be counted. These are the areas. But for you to say government has postponed census because they want to score political goal, that is not the issue. Talk about real things. Do we have qualified mappers? Do we have qualified enumerators? Do we have qualified cartographers? These are the areas you tackle. Supervisors, bring out tangibles, right? Professionally, you think of that, then we can able to make Sierra Leone a better place for all of us. The president has made his part, and he has a dream, the passion for each and every one of us to be a better Sierra Leonean. And Africa as a whole, because the voice is raising, it's not only for Sierra Leone, but how Africa can tap into the experiences and do better for the continent.
As we try to wrap up, Honorable Bamichidi, do you think if Sierra Leone is actually supposed to change the narrative, do you think we at liberty, we have that liberty, that civil liberty, youth voices and grassroots to make that change or to write our own narratives?
See, we understand ourselves, and and implement the needful. You are talking about the division in Africa, 54 nations.
54, yeah.
Why don't we come together? So the West is using it on us.
Do you see possibilities in that?
No. And you think they're not going to go to the UN? It's just a dream. Africa is not ready to go to the UN to have a permanent seat.
And why do you say so, if I may ask?
Why?
Why do you say
you
Africa
look
is
at the trajectory. One is saying another thing. You have the Northwest Arab kind of thing. You have the South Africa. You have the West African region. All coming with different vibes. That is why the president mentioned Ethiopia. It's the last when they went there in 1963. The Albert was Albert of Africa. They came in together with a Pan-Africanist strain from Nkrumah. But what did happen? It was sabotage. Now we are talking about the developments and stuff. But we cap in hands, go and beg them money, and then they give us. And how can it be talk about dignity? I called it you and I give you. So in other words, we come from that beggar mentality, poverty and beggar mentality. We're not going to move on. Even in Sierra Leone, unity in diversity, bring all shades of opinion on board, and then you see certain movements going. But still, there's a big division, and we don't even address that issue. We talk about 54 nations. Let us address our own division here. We take it for granted. They say upline, midline, team midline. It's not necessary. We're all Sierra Leoneans when they step out of Lungi. You think Sierra Leone. That is why the civic culture should be upgraded so that you bring people together, unity in strength. That was the Commonwealth talk some years ago when Queen Elizabeth was there. Unity in diversity. We have different shades of opinion, but we have to accommodate each other. Till we start accommodating each other, then there's nobody going to come in between us. There will be no development.
Do you think there's this element of resistance in terms of transformation of Africa or Sierra Leone, to be specific?
I will start with us now. We are going on, hands on. But sometimes the people charged with the responsibility don't even know what they're charged with. That's a problem. That is why the monetary regulation comes in. Because they say go and transform the country. Then you look at this deliverable things, I think, one at Cotton Tree, one at Uzibu. Those signboards are good. But are we implementing it? No. But then they will tell we are resilient people when it comes to starvation. They will tell we are resilient people.
But how can we as ordinary citizens
or when somebody is coming, they say in his wisdom. What wisdom? It's wisdom bringing people together.
How can we as ordinary citizens contribute to writing our narrative?
The narrative is come up with the right program, and let's see, like I said, negotiations. We are bad in negotiating, like the Chinese did. But when they were in opposition, they criticize. When they're in government, try to correct the narrative, bring them up together. I've not told you how many money they collect at the Chinese base. Individuals have been benefiting from it, and they don't ask anything. It's like they are like, what's the man? Michael Abra syndrome in Momos Day when he left the deal to his generation. They transfer thief money. No. So we have to make sure we love ourselves first and work as Sierra Leonean. Whether you like it or not, Gambia is for Gambia, Nigeria is for Nigeria, which we Guinea is for Guinea. Look at the issue of Yanga. Are we talking about it? They'll just come with political propaganda. There is troop going to Yanga when there is nothing there. We have to be honest, sincere with ourselves to get the action done. That's my own concern. So when you're talking about 54 nations not coming together, that is the value strategy.
It spoke about citizens participation, as you asked. I think we should go back to the Constitution, which tells us our duties, roles, and responsibility. As a citizen, I would advise, let us come together. Whether you are a market woman, but if you are there as a chairlady, you are a leader. If you are a chairman, you are a leader. I'm saying this it cuts across. Let's think Sierra Leone, right? In your own little way, how can we come together and say, let's leave this politicking and join hands with the authorities to build our nation? Let people stop destroying state property. It is your taxpayers' money and mine. If we destroy them, who is going to suffer the most? It's us. Right. So let us stop all this bad politicking. And our political leaders also should be honest with themselves. And we now know exactly how politicians are. So it's left to us, the citizens or the voters, to choose between the left and the right. Our advice, let's leave the politicking. Okay. Let's bring ourselves together. it will be better for us.
Thank you so much, Solomon Sundu, and thanks to Honorable Bami Chidi for being with us this morning to discuss about the ongoing conference, which is currently happening in London. We will now go over to our team, Remy. Nabre, Bangura, and the rest of the crew in London, presently at the Atlantic School of Government at Oxford University. And thanks to our viewers and listeners for being with us this morning. But please ensure you stay with us as the conference is still ongoing, and we're joining our team in London.
Because we're finding that on our continent in particular, but also in the Caribbean, Latin America, elsewhere in the world, women are trading digitally. And digital trade is the fastest growing segment of trade. Services trade is growing very fast, faster than goods trade, but digitally delivered services trade is growing much faster. It was actually growing at about 8%. Per year, which is phenomenally. So we decided to see who is in this, who is involved, and how can we help. And so we launched this fund with the sister or daughter organization, the International Trade Center, a $50 million fund to empower women trading digitally. Now, of course, you trade digitally if digital infrastructure is decent, and we know there is a big digital divide. So what we try to do, we are not a financing agency. We can raise these kinds of funds. We have technical assistance funds, which we use to help countries. But for big infrastructure, we went to partner with the World Bank because our members were telling us that, look, we need to do something about this divide. And we have a pilot project ongoing now with about, how many? 8 African countries with the Africa region of the World Bank. We are looking at the gaps in their digital infrastructure to see what are these gaps and what needs to be filled. So 8 countries are part of it. We will work with the soft infrastructure because you need regulatory systems to deal with digital trade, and many of our countries don't have it. And the hope is that when we finish these studies, the World Bank will put the money for the hard infrastructure to help lay it down. So we're actually trying to do something through partnership. With respect to the ecosystem to support the wide fund. So one, we want to use this fund to scale up. With women, I'm tired of hearing stories of little pilot startups and programs. So we're actually looking for women who are succeeding, who need to get to the next level, and then give them a substantial amount of money so they can scale. And we're hoping that when they scale, they will become more attractive to financial institutions. And we'll work with them in some cases to showcase them to existing financial institutions in their environment and elsewhere, so that the ecosystem can be built by the financial system getting involved. You know, and it works. We tried something like this when I was finance minister in Nigeria, and we created so many young entrepreneurs who are flourishing today. So get them into the existing financial infrastructure so that they can become self-sufficient and dependent and not waiting for grant funding or government funding later. With respect to industrial policy, is there industrial policy that can be both beneficial, you said domestically, as well as externally? You know, industrial policy has become the rage again. When we were in graduate school, industrial policy sometimes was seen as a dirty word. Yep. But I do believe that there is a way that you can do industrial policy still respecting our rules at the World Trade Organization that can benefit. You know, you have the infant industry argument. You have at the WTO something we call special and differential treatment. Every time we have an agreement, developing countries have the right to have some exceptions to implementation or to take a longer time to implement, and they are always fighting to make this better and improved, and they have a point. So to that effect, the idea that perhaps there's a regime of tariffs you can utilize for a specific period of time in order for your industry to grow before you then have to open up, because it's been proven that if you continue protecting for any long period of time, you never become competitive. We've tried that before as import substitution. It didn't work. So yes, domestically there can be a way that it can be done, so you can build your manufacturing or industrial capacity. And there's an ongoing debate at the WTO now by developing countries looking for policy space for industrialization, and this is one of the areas that they are looking at. But the new industrial policy that wants to also favor green industrialization, where there is a search by members for what sorts of green subsidies will be permissible. Now, this is why I think we need to look at our existing agreement that was made 30 years ago and ask if it's fit for purpose and whether we renegotiate to take account of these kinds of issues. Very good issues that you raise. Economic partnership agreements, the principles you negotiate. It will take a bit of interesting conversation, but one of the things we need to look at when we are negotiating these agreements, one of the things that keeps African countries back is we never add value to our products. We are not going to capture any bigger slice of the international market. And it's not only because the rules are against us, but we need to look inside and say, what are we not doing right? And when we do it right, what's holding it back? If we add value to our product, is there tariff escalation? And there is. That's where we need to fight externally, to see that if you add value to your cocoa and it becomes chocolate, you suddenly see that if you try to export it to Switzerland, I was telling the Swiss the other day, that it's not only in Switzerland we can make good chocolate. You can also make it in Ghana, and they are doing it, and in Nigeria, and in Côte d'Ivoire. And then you can remove the tariffs that are layered on when you try to export finished or value-added products. This is some of the challenges we face outside, externally, that we have to fight. But inside, we are still exporting largely raw commodities. And one of the fights that we're having, or not fights, but one of the things we're trying to encourage at the WTO is decentralization of supply chains to parts of the world that have not benefited from world trade. And Africa is one of them. We're running out of time, but let me just say this, because this is so important. I took the job at the WTO because when I saw the purpose of the organization as written in the Marrakesh Agreement, I said to myself, wow, this is so compelling, but this is not what's happening. The WTO was created, its purpose written down is to enhance living standards, to help create employment, and to support sustainable development. What could be better than that? This is all about people, helping people. But who knows that? How many of you knew that in the audience, that this is what the WTO is about? Did you know that? How many? Tell me. 2, 3. Oh no, you don't count, Nicole. 2 people. Young people. When I took the job, one of my sons said, Mommy, you can't take a job in that organization. It's against people. And I said, no. Let me show you. I didn't invent it. So we must change this organization to deliver its purpose. That's why I went there. Because it's not delivering enough for us on the continent. And now, and my thing is that why I went into international organizations is I saw there are not enough people from Africa, developing countries. We can't just sit back and point at them. We need to go there and change it. And it's a monumental task. But at least to myself, I said, if by the time I leave, I've chipped away at a few things that will make things better for the continent. That is. And one of the things we are working on now is trying to persuade businesses and supply chains to decentralize to the continent. Working with Dr. Tedros at WHO and WIPO, we have a tripartite agreement. We are succeeding on pharmaceuticals. We are on manufacture of vaccines. We now have 3 or 4 countries where regional manufacturing capacity is being built so that we can manufacture our own vaccines, as Mr. President said. and our own pharmaceuticals. We need a pharmaceutical supply chain on the continent. We don't need to import 80%, 90% of our pharmaceuticals and 95% of our vaccines. That's what we're doing now. Secondly, critical minerals. We have all these critical minerals, but no value is added to them on the continent. We must insist all the way to EV batteries. It will take years to develop it. But why not, if we have these minerals, let's bid for subcontinental supply chains or continental, so that for the future we can create value. Those are just two agro-allied supply chains, another area where there's promise. So I can tell you, I can see it. There's opportunity here, now, with this crisis to attract but what must we do? They won't just come. And we are not the only countries in the world bidding for investment. We have to look internally. Our trade costs are too high. Our infrastructure is lacking. And so much so we are not even trading with ourselves. We're all talking of African Continental Free Trade Area, but it's 16% trade among us. EU is 62%. If that's the North Star of integration, we should be looking at those numbers. So we need to do better internally to make our countries investment friendly. And we've actually launched an agreement at the WTO called the Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement with 127 countries. If you sign on, once we get it done, it's going to make countries that sign on look a little more attractive. They have to still work hard, but they will look more attractive. That is something I really want to see done at the WTO as our own contribution. No aid is coming, please. We need two things: attract investment and mobilize more of our own domestic resources. Otherwise, we're not going to be attractive to global supply chains. Thank you.
I have a lot of hands. Can I keep going for a couple of minutes, or do we need to close? I'm looking for the MCs. Where are the organizers?
She says I have 5 minutes.
Brilliant, fantastic. So I'm going to take a flurry. I'm going to take those four, but really quick, one question each. You can't say I've got four. So just the four over here, but very quick, one question each, so that everyone can get their chance.
Yes, so thank you so much. I'm Iola, and I'm a vaccine researcher with the Oxford Vaccine Group here at the University of Oxford. And thank you for mentioning about vaccine development and manufacturing in Africa, because that relates to my question. So in June 2024, the African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator Program was launched, and this is to invest $1.2 billion over the next 10 years. And my question is, what are the foreseeable challenges you see with Africa achieving the goal of manufacturing 60% of their vaccines by 2040? And how can WTO as an organization help with this? Thank you so much.
Great. And pass the... Yep, next.
Dr. Ngozi, it's a privilege to be here. I'm currently reading a postgrad in financial strategy. I've got a very quick question when it comes to negotiation. You mentioned that the US have demanded to negotiate with individual countries in Africa. And of course they would, when it comes, it's in their best interest, and they wouldn't dictate that in Europe. But surely, shouldn't a unity of Africa would provide a greater negotiation force in the medium to long term? Thank you.
Great, and across to this, across to this gentleman here. And you, and then next. Yep. No, take that question. Yes, all right, cool. Stay with it.
Dr. Ngozi, it's a privilege to have you here as well. I'm a big fan of your work. We last met in New York on the economics of water, and partnered together. My name is Charles Chinda. I'm a Master Public Policy at Blavatnik here. My question is, obviously when it comes to trade, I believe it's a lot more about bargaining power. And I think weaponization of interdependence when it comes to trade has been a big issue. You've talked about decentralizing supply chains, and much of Africa is all embedded in neocolonialism. So I wondered what your thoughts were for Africa, especially the African Union, to build a lot of capacity in order to ensure that we have a lot more bargaining power. It doesn't really matter even if we got mineral resources, whatever it is, but if supply chains are controlled by superpowers, then you pretty much have no bargaining power. So I wondered what your reflection was, because I mean, negotiating on individual countries another thing, but I think for the AU is a key thing.
Great question, and then over to this gentleman. Yep.
Thank you very much. I'm Ed Cole. I'm head of Innovate UK ICURE program. This is a UK government program to support universities in the UK to exploit their research. Thank you. This has been really inspiring. So I'll make my question really direct. That is the role of intellectual property. You talked about investments and about adding value, and His Excellency President Maada talked also about the fact that there is brilliance in Africa. What advice would you give, and what's needed to put in place robust intellectual property to enable innovation and also for growth and international trade?
Great, and then the last one. This is, thank God I've got the smartest woman in the world on my right. No, just, okay, you've got 5 words each. Go.
Okay. So my name is Christopher. I work with Oxford University. So basically, I just want to be specific, especially for Nigeria, that, export is oil. Most times, most of those oil also come from the US. I just want to know what this, trade agreement or the interest that the US have, assigned to each country.
Great,
what
oil and Nigeria, right? And last.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is Alan Sionadefis from DR Congo. I spent 25 years in asset management, and my question is about the funding gap of Sustainable Development Goals. That gap is growing every single year. My question is, what needs to happen in terms of the financial infrastructure to help closing that gap and channel money from asset managers, asset owners, institutional finance into African situations where it's needed the most?
Thank you. So it's a huge agenda, but it serves, frankly, just to help us understand the agenda in the room. I can't possibly expect Ngozi to answer on vaccines, negotiation, the AU, IP, oil, and the Sustainable Development Goals. But Ngozi, is there any one of those, or that you would like to reflect on?
Okay.
And then I have one last little 2 questions over this side after that. But let's do some answers for that.
No more time.
Right.
You want to take that question, I think.
I'm just going to take the lady here, and then I'm going to have to close and let Ngozi give us a closing statement. Just right here. Just go without the microphone, I'll repeat it.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Ngozi. I'm Power What practical steps can diplomats take to navigate the persistent imbalance between developed and developing countries in trade negotiations? And what reform can they take that will best serve their country's long-term interest?
Right, that which is like the negotiation question. Ngozi, sorry, I've given you an impossible task.
Yeah, I'm so sorry because I have a flight to catch. That's why we're a little bit stressed. Not that I don't want to spend time with you. On the vaccine issue, I was on the high-level panel that looked at the financing of vaccines. And as many of you may know, I was the chair of the Global Alliance of Vaccines, Gavi, for 5 years. I was chair of the board. So this is an area so I think we recommended a pandemic fund of 10 billion. And as of today, $3 billion has been raised, because I think one of the challenges is finding the 1.2 billion financing. It's not going to come easy. So how do we raise that? But I think that there are avenues. We've just seen some of the biggest philanthropists declare that they want to spend a lot of their money. Bill Gates, 200 billion in the next 20 years. Since we don't have aid coming, or Europe has to finance security and defense, so they are cutting their aid budgets. and Europe is the most generous as a percent of GDP. The US is the largest in terms of volume, but they are cutting. And so we have to think of how to mobilize philanthropic finance. We have so many billionaires aiming to be trillionaires in the world. And somehow we've got to persuade them to share some of this for issues such as pandemic. So I think financing is a hurdle. Another hurdle is regulatory hurdles. The biggest complaint I hear from those pharmaceuticals and others who want to manufacture is Africa's fragmented regulatory landscape. And so the issue is, can we get the African Medicines Agency or the CDC, how can we get a more unified landscape? And actually, we began to talk to them about some of this. Would some countries be comfortable if we don't have continental regulation, that if one or two other countries who have very deep regulatory regimes in the area of food and drugs, if they certify and say these vaccines are okay, would the other countries be willing to accept their certification? This is one way to look at it until we can build a continental regulatory regime. So these are some of, I think the regulatory hurdles really scare the manufacturers. So I'll just stop just to give you an idea of two things which are there, but I think they have solutions and we need to pursue them. By the way, during the time that the pandemic was raging, Your Excellency, we had ordered vaccines for Africa through COVAX, and they had been manufactured, and they were sitting in one country that I would not name, that put, because the outbreak worsened in their country, they put an export ban on sending those vaccines to Africa. So we wouldn't have been at the back of the queue had they sent those vaccines. So trade issues can block even when you have money. And that's one lesson I learned, you know, and I can tell you the name of the country later. I won't say it publicly. But I went there and they finally agreed to send some vaccines, not all, to our people. Then there's a question about the unity, negotiating as one. It looks like many of you are really interested in this issue that Naira raised. Is it better for the country, whether it's for drugs or for supply chains, or what power do we have? I really believe we could have more agency and power if we could indeed come together with one voice, as His Excellency said, and negotiate as one. If we could do it, it would give us so much more. But that means that our countries have to be willing to give the AU that agency to be able to negotiate. But I noticed that when there's a conference, sometimes we have these partnership things, 54 African leaders fly to a country to have a conference. It'd be nice if they invited that president to fly to Africa and meet us there, either in Addis or something. It sends a signal. Your Excellency, you're here. I would suggest that. I don't know why 54 of our leaders are constantly flying here, flying there, meeting people. Well, it's nice sometimes to go elsewhere. But I mean, I would send a signal that, look, we are one continent. We are all going to meet in our continental capital, Addis. You come, you're one president, come and talk to us in our place. That way, we begin to build power, strength, to send a signal that we have one voice, and we actually, and the president that is leading the AU then can be empowered to listen to his peers and get what could work for the continent. It's not easy. Look at the EU. So I'm saying it, but I also want to admit that this kind of coordination takes skill. EU is 27. And what it takes them to get all 27 to agree to a common policy is very difficult. But they are managing it somehow. It's very difficult. So 54 countries is going to be a challenge, but we need to start finding a way to build that. Maybe around certain issues, not everything. Just take one or two and say, on this issue, it's going to be one voice. And then we'll do that. So if we do that, if the AU were empowered, they could attract some supply chains that can work continentally. But beyond that, we have to provide the infrastructure. Business is about making profit. They are not coming there for charity. So if you want them to come continentally or subcontinentally, I would start, let's say West Africa-based supply chain. Can we look at the infrastructure that is needed to underpin this investment and see what we can do and what we can do to build that infrastructure? So all this will take planning and a longer time. Intellectual property. A very, very good question, very strong. WTO is the home of the trade-related intellectual property agreement. I'm not quite sure why, because we have a World Intellectual Property Organization. So I came and I asked, why are we housing this? But we do. But we work with WIPO, whose CEO, whose DG Darren Tang is a good friend. And we've seen that Africans are not able to validate their intellectual property. We are very behind in turning this into money the way others do. We are very behind in registering patents. We're even behind in the regulatory framework that can help us do this country by country. So there's a whole set of work to be done on intellectual property. Again, WHO, WTO, and WIPO have gotten together. We've launched a pilot effort with 16 countries to try to see, can we help them better in this area of intellectual property to enable use? Because I'll tell you, when I was minister at home, we have brilliant people in my country. I'm so proud. Researchers who have discovered things. But how to go from the lab to commercialization? No money was being put behind this, no thought. So you have good inventions languishing. And I'm sure it's like that in many countries. So we don't lack the brains. We don't lack the knowledge. We lack how to take that from the lab to the market. And this is an area of work. Okay.
Fantastic.
Nigeria, export of oil. First of all, in the US, oil has been exempted. It doesn't face any tariffs, but to me, that's not the issue. The issue is about diversification of the economy. Not, for the meantime, we have oil, we export, we do what we can, but the fundamental question, diversification of exports and ability for us to tap our taxes. Nigeria's economy is actually quite well diversified in very interesting ways, but because we need to push further on really valorizing that diversification instead of oil. We've got brilliant young people in the tech sector, in fintech, in fashion, in creativity. When I was there, we rebased the economy because we hadn't done that for 25 years, and you're supposed to do it every 5 years. And we found that the creative industries make up 1% of GDP at the time, which we didn't know. This is very, very important. So we have areas within our economy in agriculture, agro-based industries, creative industries that was mentioned by the Africa president that we can really focus on. That's what we need to be focusing on in our country. So I hope I've answered your question. Oil doesn't have any tariffs on it, but I'm not interested as much in oil. I'm interested in other sections of the economy. Funding gap for SDGs. This is a big issue and a big question. We're so behind on the SDGs. There's going to be the Financing for Development Conference at the end of June in Sevilla, Spain, to discuss this issue. So I can't discuss it in 1 minute. A whole conference is going to spend 2 days looking at this issue. But grosso modo, I don't see, there's not much hope in terms of grant funding. In my mind, aid is almost dead. And I want our leaders to know that. So we need a complete change in mindset. We just need to go and look at our taxation system and our tax administration, because this aid is not coming. Every day they're in my office. They're cutting the aid budget to finance defense because the US is no longer going to support Europe with defense spending. So if you're sitting there thinking down the line, aid is going to come, it's not. And the little we are going to get has to be used extremely strategically. There will be some. Some of it should go to the human and social sector, some. But the rest needs to be used for de-risking purposes, in my view, to help attract private investment. We need to set up de-risking funds. And I'm saying to the EU, instead of giving 100 million to Tunisia or Morocco or whoever to stop migrants going to Europe, and then they make camps in the desert where they are all maltreated and dying, why don't we put this money into a de-risk fund that can help attract private investment to create more jobs on the continent and keep the young people home? It will help us, it will help you, and it's a much better use. So I think the funding gap for SDGs will be big, it will be there. It's not going to be closed in the normal way unless Bill Gates decides to give all his money to SDGs, which I don't think he will. Therefore, we have to get wise. How do we raise our own resources, and how do we use the little aid we have to attract the private sector? And then finally, I think it was imbalance between developed and developing countries and negotiations. Well, you need to have, first, you need to know what you want to negotiate. Why you want to negotiate it, what's in it for you. And then you've got to plan your negotiating strategy. So negotiation is not something you come into, whether it's trade or some other things. Just saying, let me listen to what they have to say, and then I'll make a strategy. No, I think before you even start, you need to have your own plan, and I'm sure you do, and strategic thinking. And then you've got to say, what cards do I have? Vis-a-vis this person I'm negotiating with. What cards do I have? What is my strength that I can use as leverage? And what strength do they have? When we were asking for debt relief, we didn't have many cards, $30 billion of debt payments. You know, but we mobilized every kind of card that we could think about. Part of it was to say, well, if you really want to get some of this money back, here's a suggested way we can pay you a certain amount. The rest you won't be able to pay. Let's sit at the table and we'll explain why. The other one was to say, if you leave this to us, we will use it wisely to fund education and health, because the debt service was twice the education and health budget. And that didn't make, why are you wanting to give us aid when we are paying you this? Just forgive it, and we will use that same money to finance this. And we created a virtual poverty fund in Nigeria where the money forgiven went directly into that financing, so they could see we were not just talking jazz. So we prepared, we had our cards, you have incentives, you have disincentives, you line them up, and you have your negotiating strategy. Thank you.
Well, join me. Can I just say, before we close, a tour de force by Dr. Okonjo following President Bio's wonderful introduction this morning. In a very tumultuous world where many leaders are saying, what on earth do we do? Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is just giving you a resounding message for each of your countries. For me, it was prepare to seize these new opportunities. Be polyandrous in your international relations. And produce more at home. In other words, there's so much to do when you take your brilliance back home, as President Bio suggested. Please join me in thanking Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
That was fabulous. Sorry, I have to run. You were fantastic. Oh, so were you. Thank you so much.
Delegates, have a beating applause to the women in power. We have Dr. Ngozi and Professor Woods. Thank you very much. Please do take your seats as we transition to the next part of our program. What an amazing session, insightful, inspiring. Luhano, what's your big takeaway?
Big takeaway is think strategically and do your homework. That's it, like do your homework. Whether it's in diplomacy, in negotiations, do your homework.
All right, and at this juncture, we want to transition to the next part of our program, which is a group photo. and we'll be receiving some directions. The group photo will require for all of us to stand. We will be looking up there. There's a cameraman. Oh, there we go. And just before we take that, do take note that lunch is going to be at the back of this room, seminar room 3. And for our guests, our speakers will go to the next level, the first level. You'll have the speakers lounge there. All right, let's rise for the photo. Yes, it's up there.
Committee members.
Okay.
But the clubs would just.
Sorry. Wait. Good.
Wonderful. Can I maybe have just a few people who are in this corner, just moving just this way? The main thing is just that you can see this camera. Right, let me just make sure I can see everyone. Okay, the main thing is that we can see this camera just here. Can you guys down there see the camera? Just about, maybe just in this very front row, just taking a little step backwards. That's good, wonderful, fantastic. Let's have a little look. Amazing. Just a few people in this very corner. Can you just go backwards just a tiny bit? I know it's